Hi, and welcome back to the Save It for Parts channel. Longtime viewers might remember when I did more boat projects than satellite and radio projects, one of which was this DIY ROV, or remotely operated vehicle, basically a small camera submarine. Now, I built this thing a few years back to explore abandoned mines that happen to be underwater, as well as flooded caves and underground tunnels. I actually happen to be scuba certified, although it's been a quarter century since I took that class, and I enjoy exploring caves, but I would not personally want to combine the two. I've done enough of both to know that cave diving is the most dangerous thing you can do. It's more dangerous than skydiving, it's more dangerous than pretty much any other hobby, so I built a robot to do it for me. Now, the last time I sent this down in a flooded mine, about 2 or 3 years ago, I killed it. I sent it down too deep, I ran into some rocks on the bottom, I flooded some stuff, I burned out the controls, basically destroyed the thing. Now, I've been thinking about rebuilding the little ROV here, but I don't have to because a viewer gave me a real one. So big thank you to viewer Nick, who supplied me with an actual ROV submarine. Now, this is a Save It for Parts project. This thing is a little bit scratch and dent. I think it is missing a few pieces. It needs some work, but it is in much better condition and much better designed than what I came up with from scrap plumbing parts here. This video is sponsored by PCBWay, who offer a range of creative services for DIY makers like myself. Now, I know all about doing DIY projects that look very DIY, but if you're trying to take your project to the next level, perhaps you're trying to make something more available for sale, more available to the public, and you want it to cleaner, you want it to look nicer, you want the quality of parts a little better than your first prototype, PCBWay is a great way to make that dream into a reality. You've probably heard of PCBWay when it comes to making custom printed circuit boards, and they do have a promotion right now where you can get a free purple mask on your circuit board, so you don't have to go with just the standard green circuit board. But they offer a bunch of other products and services as well. They can injection mold stuff, they can laser cut, they can 3D print, they can even do metal machining and milling. So if you want to take your project to the next level, take it past the level of bodged together PVC plumbing like I had with my original DIY ROV, and bring your project up to something like this standard, something like a professional ROV, then look into PCBWay and look into some of the tools and services that they provide. PCBWay is also running their 8th project design competition right now, where you can showcase your work, showcase things that you've invented or created, and if your project is cool enough, you can even win some really cool prizes. Thank you again to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. I will throw links to all of that stuff that I talked about down in the description. So if you want to check out their services, if you want to check out their free purple PCB upgrade by the end of September here, jump on that before the end of the month. And of course, if you're interested in their 8th annual design competition, there's some really cool entries in there, so check those out. And if you've got something to submit for yourself, go ahead and do that because there are some cool prizes. Now, the basic concept of both these devices is pretty similar. You have your neutrally buoyant platform with motors or thrusters on it here, and I made mine neutrally buoyant with pool noodles and weights like this big heavy flashlight. The light is also for seeing in the dark underwater. If you're in a flooded cave or you're deep enough in the water, you need extra lights. I have cameras, both this one and a GoPro mount. And this little box in the middle was supposed to be waterproof and have some of the electronics. And then I have this reel of tether wire, control, power, and video cable. So this I just made out of an Ethernet cable. I have 12-volt power going down to the ROV, and I have composite video coming back up from the nav cam. On the ground control end, I had this little console with the control buttons. I have power from a battery, I have my video connection, and as you can tell, very professionally made. I also had this little recorder unit which could record the composite video, although this has been sitting in my garage for a while, and I think one of the neighborhood cats peed on it because this smells terrible right now. I might end up having to throw this out. I regret touching that thing. My hands smell like cat pee now. All right, I washed my hands so I can show you my new ROV. Now, from what I understand, this is an older model, discontinued. It's not made or sold anymore. And like I said, it's going to need some repairs. We've got some loose pieces here. These lights need to be reattached. I think I need a battery. I'm not 100% sure what else it needs. We'll have to start looking into that. But basically similar to what I built. We have buoyancy flotation units here. We have thrusters, some up-down thrusters, as well as kind of forward and back or turning thrusters. This one has a 3D printed frame, as well as, I think the flotation chambers might be 3D printed as well. It has a separate battery compartment and then the electronics compartment up above. And just like my old one, it has a spool of wire or tether. And yeah, this one also has an Ethernet connection. One neat feature of this is that the equipment cylinders are transparent, so you can actually see what's in there. And there's a Raspberry Pi brain. I believe there's also an Arduino brain, so I'm not sure which one controls what. There is also an RC receiver. There are some little ESC devices here from Blue Robotics. I believe Blue Robotics are the original makers of this device. And so there are a number of smart devices in here. There's quite a bit of wiring. There is a little camera in the front dome, and that camera is on a servo, so it can tilt up and down. I'm actually going to have to read up on the manuals for this. A lot of this thing is open source. I think a lot of the hardware design is open source, the software is open source, so I should be able to get an idea of how to interface with this thing and how to use it. I believe this runs an open source firmware called ArduPilot or Arduino Autopilot, and that is commonly used for DIY drones. All right, ROV update. I found a couple batteries, which I think Nick also gave me, and I just forgot about them because I had them downstairs with the battery pile. So I found a battery charger, which I actually bought for another project, but I think this will work with these batteries. I also found an Xbox controller because you can't have a submarine without an Xbox controller. Apparently that's even what the millionaires do, so that works out fine for everybody. I also read through the instructions for this thing and found that I need a vacuum pump to do some testing on it to make sure it's watertight, so I bought a cheap vacuum pump on Amazon. I also bought some of the recommended grease from the manual, and I 3D printed a GoPro mount, and it's actually a good thing I did this because I noticed that the 3 screws or bolts that hold this mount on are missing, so they must have had a mount on this before. And I'll need to find some matching screws to both attach this thing and seal up this battery compartment fully. Also these lights, I mentioned earlier that the lights seem to be broken. Well, they're actually just rubber bands that hold these on, and those funny clips that I thought had another piece that clamped on, yeah, it's just a rubber band clamp, so that works pretty well. All right, so I'm trying to find this tiny bolt that holds this onto the battery compartment, and I've got this whole wall of random bolts and hardware. I have all these little bins of smaller random bolts and hardware, most of which is not organized. It's just kind of shoved in there. Got random piles. I don't know if I'm actually going to find this exact thing in there, but I remembered that I bought this kit for another project a while back, and it has all the M whatever by whatever bolts. I have no idea what size that is. I'm just going to try to match it up to something that's close enough, and we'll see if that works. I haven't even opened this yet. I'm sure eventually this finely organized collection will go into... Eventually it'll all migrate into one of these bins that's just kind of miscellaneous bolts of various sizes. And yeah, it's a nightmare over here. Since this whole submarine is open source, they have all of the parts, like the GoPro mount, on their website, all the STL files. They even have files for the chassis, for the flotation units. Basically, you can 3D print this whole thing, or at least all the structural elements, and then you can source the other parts from their website or from other spots. But yeah, that is really nice. So if I break or damage anything, I can just 3D print a new piece. All right, so I'm absolutely not good at these fancy LiPo batteries or whatever. I'm used to just the old regular batteries where you just, you plug them in and they charge and there's no problems and they don't catch on fire and explode the way these things supposedly do if you screw it up. I've read through the manual, makes no sense. Don't know what to do with that. I think this is a LiPo 4S, 14.8 volt, and says there's a balance connect error. I've got the balance thing hooked up, I've got the battery hooked up. I basically have no idea what I'm doing with this. Okay, this one seems to be charging. This one kept giving me errors, so I guess there's something wrong with this battery. I don't know what to do with it. If anybody has ideas for how to make this do interesting and or exciting things, let me know in the comments. So thanks to a viewer, I also have the perfect laptop to go with this submarine. This is a slightly older Panasonic Toughbook. So this is a somewhat waterproof, somewhat drop-proof industrial strength laptop. It weighs a ton. It's got the old style square screen, but I think it's new enough to run the ground control software for the submarine. And with a rugged laptop like this, I can take it on a boat. I can take it maybe underground if I do some more flooded caves with the submarine. So I think that's going to be a cool ground control system for the ROV here. And I told the person who sent me this that I would mention the scout group they're involved with. So shout out to Louisa Troop 3 and Troop 1003 Radio Scouting Team. I was never in Boy Scouts, but those sound like some cool scout groups. I think it's time to open this thing up and do some basic checks on it before I give it power. And I have to admit, I'm a little intimidated by the sheer number of through-hole connectors back here. I don't know what to do with any of these. I am going through the manual that I printed off. There are pressure relief valves, there are through-hole bulkheads, there are all kinds of things. So, yeah, let's see. There's supposed to be a tool for this, and I do not have the correct tool, so I'm going to see if I can just do this by hand. Yeah, it just kind of pulls out. So that is the end cap on the battery compartment. I think the entire electronics tube comes off. And I would like to open it up just to kind of get a closer look at what's in there. There seems to be some electrical tape that's come loose and maybe some zip ties that have broken. So I don't really want to try giving it power or firing it up until I make sure everything in there is still connected and not shorted out. Well, this certainly has a smell to it. It definitely smells like burning electronics. So there might be something that's fried in here. I'm not sure. It would help if I knew what everything was, but I think these ESC things are the motor controls for individual thrusters. This is the tether interface. Yeah, we've got this Pix Hawk. I think that's the RC controller. And then we've got a Raspberry Pi down underneath. This is one of those pieces of electrical tape that I talked about being loose, and it's kind of gooey, so the adhesive on that has decayed over time. And I think there's just supposed to be tape over these terminal blocks to just keep spare wires from touching each other. I'll go ahead and get this ground control program installed. And that does not actually work, so we'll have to go back inside where the Wi-Fi reaches and try to install whatever this DLL is. I still don't have the right battery connector, but let's see if we can just do a bench test with this thing, connect to it with the computer, and see what works and what doesn't, if anything. Alright, I missed getting it on video, but I just changed the IP address on my computer to what was specified in the manual, and it said manual flight mode, and now I think we've got a picture from the ROV down here. Well, you could watch me fumble through the settings here, but let's just jump to when I've got it figured out. I was trying to go through the initial setup and do the calibration and whatnot, and Q ground control just crashed in the middle of accelerometer calibration. So now when I boot up, we're kind of stuck in calibration mode here. Alright, we've brought this thing inside to ruin the surface of my desk. I tried to update the firmware by going to the onboard web server on the brain. That doesn't seem to work. I can't get to that server. So the newest version of Q ground control won't even load on this computer. Yeah, call me a grumpy old man, but I feel like a lot of software updates in the last decade make software worse. Wow, I haven't seen that many sketchy pop-ups since I tried visiting a .ru domain. Wow, that installed like 8,000 new drivers on here. I'm not 100% sure if I want to uninstall these and try again, or at this point it might be easier to just reinstall Windows. I was going to do the vacuum test next, but I don't think I have the adapters to go from this vacuum pump to waterproof enclosures, so I don't actually know what part I need either. So I've emailed the fellow that gave this to me, and I'm going to ask him what part that is. We'll push all this aside for maybe another week, and we'll come back to it again. Latest update, the company no longer makes the vacuum adapter for this thing, so we will not be using the vacuum pump. Instead, I'm just going to throw it in the fish pond here and see if it leaks. And this isn't just me being a redneck as usual. This was actually suggested by the prior owner to put it in various depths of ponds, go a little deeper each time, see if any water gets inside. So I guess we're just going to try that. I'm back to being a redneck. Since I don't have lead weights that match these, I'm just going to zip tie some bolts onto this thing. And then if I need to add or remove weight, I can just thread on different numbers of nuts here. So I do have one piece of lead, so I might put that over here just to balance this out. But this is just temporary. We'll figure out some permanent lead weights later. All right, we are neutrally buoyant, or as close as I can get. Hopefully I'm not sucking up any of my fish. I think they are smart enough not to get sucked up in the thing here, but let's try to dive it. And I'm not seeing any water in there, although we are picking up weeds again in the thrusters. And yeah, all the fish were smart enough to just come over to this side and hide from it, but yeah, it stirred up a lot of muck in the pond there, so it's not great to be driving around the pond. It just makes a mess in here. Well, that seems like a pretty successful test. The submarine works, it stays dry, all the thrusters work underwater, it stays neutrally buoyant, we've replaced or rednecked away all of the missing parts. The laptop mostly works, the ground control software kind of works enough. I think we're ready to go to a lake. All right, I've come out to a local lake, and this was a poorly thought out starting point because there are a ton of weeds here, so we're gonna have to see if we can navigate out past the weeds and then dive down. Also, it's quite a long walk from the parking lot, so I had to lug all this junk out here from the car. So yeah, in the future, we need to do a little more planning for our dive sites. But for now, I'm still just testing the thing to see if it'll flood, see if it all works, and apparently see how much weeds I can harvest out of this lake. I'm also noticing a possible problem with my tether system here. As this spools out, the center here just spins around. So I don't know if that's going to be an issue with the little battery hanging off of it or the Ethernet cable. I guess the Ethernet cable will just twist, so we'll see how that goes. We're also testing out the GoPro mount that I 3D printed here, and I also added another camera mount on top because I have an idea for that later. If this works, we're going to try something fun. I am trying to drive it right now and nothing's happening. Yeah, and this tether situation is not great. Everything is tangling, so basically I have to unhook it from the submarine every time that I want to pay out any tether. I don't know if there's a better design for this, or I don't know how you're supposed to actually use this in real life. All right, well, the submarine sank over there somewhere, so it is definitely a little bit negatively buoyant, and the fish seem to be checking it out. And the thing sure looks cool down there doing stuff, but I cannot see a thing on the camera. And I'm pretty sure I forgot to turn on the GoPro attached to it, so we're not going to get any, yeah, we're tangled in something now. Either a thruster's out or our tether's tangled in the weeds. So this is not an ideal lake for this test run.
1 ground mag anomaly. You're realigned.
Okay, my ground control is saying something about an anomaly, so I'm gonna pull back in. I think I've got weeds in one of the thrusters. Yeah, they call Minnesota the land of 10,000 lakes, but it's kind of the land of 10,000 mucky swamps. I'm gonna try sending this a little farther from the dock and maybe a little deeper, although it seems like the lake isn't too deep before you just hit that mud layer. Yeah, we'll see if we can send it out a little farther. There's no water in it yet, and I don't actually know how deep I went because I wasn't paying attention to the depth gauge. Before I give up on this lake, I have one more test I want to do, and that is putting the Insta360 camera on top of the submarine like a periscope. All right, the thing's really stuck in the weeds now. I can't even get it to come back. I'm gonna have to pull it back with the tether. You're not supposed to do that, but that's what we got. I think we've invented the stealth ROV with its own ghillie suit. Despite the issues, that was a reasonably successful test. We found out that all the thrusters work as long as they're not clogged with weeds or mud. The camera system seems to work. Q ground control is unreliable. We'll have to replace that. The tether system, tether management is an issue with this reel. I don't know what to do about that. I can't think of a better way that they've done, but maybe there's some better way with a slip ring or something. So we have some kinks to work out. And I think I'd like to try this in a place that has less weeds, less mud, clearer water if possible, but that's gonna have to be another video. I've got some ideas for that, possibly some pretty cool ideas, but we'll get to that later. For now, I think the next thing I'm gonna do with this submarine as part of this video is to fix the ballast weights. Bolts kept falling off. I did retrieve them, but they fell off of the submarine and that messed up the ballast and the balance, so we were having trouble diving towards the end. I have an idea for how to do this better, how to replace or replicate the weights that are on there, but to do that we're going to have to bring everything back to the garage, so let's cut to that. So the ballast weights on the bottom of this are just chunks of lead that are just screwed into the frame. So if we pop one out to use as a template and throw some Sandland sand down, let's say I want 5 more of these. Now I have that chunk of lead from earlier, plus I have quite a bit of lead shot from old paper shot shells that were not in good enough condition to use, and you're not really supposed to shoot lead shot these days anyway. I'm sure the Weaver furnace here is excessive for melting just lead, but this is what I have. And I'd rather not breathe lead fumes, so... The original weights are coated or painted, probably to try to keep some of the lead out of the water. They need a touch-up, so I'll give those a touch-up, and I will cover my new ones with a little bit of this rubberized stuff. Looks pretty good. One of these came out a little smaller than the others, so I think I can do some fine adjustments that way. That one might be the optional ballast weight. Well, there we go. I think this thing is ready to go out again, which will be another video because this one has gone on long enough. We've set up the ROV, we've tested the ROV, we've gotten a good baseline for how it behaves. I've fixed a few problems, I've added a few missing parts, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with it so far. It definitely is not very easy to control. It's really similar to my last ROV, the one I made out of plumbing, which was a little fiddly to control. It was kind of hard to not just slam into the bottom of lakes and ponds and whatnot, but this one should be a little bit better. It does have some features which I haven't actually tried out yet, like altitude hold or depth hold. So it should be able to just sit in one spot and not just sink to the bottom or bob up to the surface. And we will have to reballast it. I've put all the ballast weights on there, but that might be too much. So we will have to throw it in a pond again and just double check that it's floating level and just slightly positively buoyant. But we'll do that in the future. We've already seen that in this video. If anyone out there has ideas on where to take this, please let me know in the comments. If you know of a lake around the Twin Cities that is pretty clear, not so weedy, not so muddy, especially if it has something interesting like a sunken boat, I would love to take this out. And I do have some ideas. I know there are some scuba diving parks. There's one around the Twin Cities. There's one up in northern Minnesota. So it could be fun to take it up there as long as we aren't interfering with any actual scuba divers. And then I know of some other flooded mines, flooded caves and things around the area that it could be fun to take this. Some of them we've taken the old ROVs, so they wouldn't be particularly new, maybe wouldn't be that interesting if we've already done those on the channel before, but we'll see what happens. Some of those places are a little bit of a road trip, so they won't happen right away. But I would like to get some use out of this before winter, before everything starts to ice over, before the outside temperatures drop so much that I can't even dive in a cave without coming outside and having the whole thing turn into an ice cube. So anyway, any ideas that folks have that we could take this somewhere local before winter, please let me know in the comments, and maybe you'll see that in upcoming videos. Stay tuned to see what we do next with the ROV, and if you want to see my old redneck ROV made out of plumbing parts, I will put some links down in the description. Thank you to everyone out there for watching, and we'll see you next time.